Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to today's lesson. And today's lesson is from Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. This is our anchor text, or our text that we're going to be using as examples and focusing on. And this is a memoir that is written in verse, and that's going to be the focus of our lesson today. So the first thing I need you to do is get your My Perspectives book and have it ready, because you're going to be writing in it today and doing some work in it as well. So I would like you to open up to page 12 and 13. This should be the first page for our text. And the first thing we want to talk about today is, what is a memoir? A memoir is a narrative written about an important event in an author's life that affected them in some way. This is our focus today, and what is written here in this gray box, I would like you to write somewhere on page 12 or 13. Memoir is a narrative written about an important event in the author's life that affected them in some way. If you need to pause the video while you're writing that, please do. So let's talk about the characteristics of a memoir and what makes a memoir unique. A memoir is a memory or a description of a true past event. And if you look at that word memoir, the beginning letters M-E-M are the same as memory. Very similar sound, very similar words, because a memoir is a memory written from the author's life. Now, because it comes from the author's life and it's a true event, it is written in first person. And if you recall from past lessons, first person, the author uses words such as I, me, my, we. And if you think about the word me and look at the beginning of memoirs, it is a memory written about me or my life. So, of course, because it's my own event, it's going to reveal the feelings of the writer, and it's going to show what I learned from that experience. But the focus of a memoir is truly on the author's experience more than just the event itself. So because it's a focus on their experience, you really get to see things from the author's perspective. We're seeing it through the author's eyes, which is why it's written in first person. Now, memoirs are stories, so they should look just like a narrative written from a first-person point of view. The number of paragraphs in a memoir is completely up to you. There's no set rule for how many paragraphs should be in a memoir. But the goal of a memoir is to clearly show an important event or a memory from your life that has changed you. And then the other important thing in a memoir is that at the end, it must include an explanation that shows how this experience or this memory has changed or affected you in some way. Now, the other way that this story is unique is that it's written in verse. And again, on page 12 or 13 somewhere, I would like you to write the word prose and the word verse. Because again, this is what makes this memoir unique, is that it's written in verse. So let's look at the difference between the two. Prose is spoken or written language that is ordinary. It's how we talk every day, or how we would write normally. And verse is writing that is arranged with metrical rhythm. So it's having some kind of a rhyme. Prose does not pay attention to rhyme or rhythm, and verse absolutely pays attention to rhyme or rhythm. Verse is poetry. So if you think about poems, and when you're reading poems, you typically will think of some rhyming pattern that is happening. Prose is written in sentences or grouped into paragraphs, where verse is written into lines, and the lines are grouped into something called stanzas. Prose is written in a more natural and grammatical language, while verse is written in figurative and rhythmical language. Figurative and rhythmic language, that's that onomatopoeia, alliteration, those things that we learned about a few lessons ago. So what I want you to remember right now, and that's really important, is that prose is written into paragraphs. So I want you next to prose to write the word paragraphs, because that's what prose is. Prose is paragraphs. And then next to verse, I want you to write the word stanzas. Verse is written in stanzas. That is how poetry is written. So now you should have 3 things total written somewhere on page 12 or 13. You should have the description of what a memoir is, and then you should have prose and verse and what each of those are. So now I would like you to turn to page 21 of your My Perspective book. And we're going to look a little bit more into memoir and poetry for a second. This is analyzing craft and structure, and this is a standard that ELA teachers will now follow for the rest of your school career, is being able to analyze a craft of an author and the structure the author uses. So this craft and structure is memoir and poetry. And in a memoir, again, an author tells a true story of an important time in his or her life. Most memoirs are written in first-person point of view or from the author's perspective, through the author's eyes. The author tells what happened and what he or she thought or felt about it. Memoirs are usually written in prose, which uses complete sentences and paragraphs. And also most use dialogue to show how people are speaking and what they're like. But in this memoir, Jacqueline Woodson uses a very different approach. She uses a series of poems that are written in stanzas. That's what verse is. It's written in stanzas, so it's sections rather than paragraphs. She does not use typical complete sentences. She uses sentences that are broken up into separate lines. And she uses language that breaks certain rules, such as using sentence fragments or non-standard capitalization, which means that words that typically would be capitalized, she doesn't capitalize them. So the reason that Woodson uses this type of craft and structure is that she wants to affect the readers, her readers, in a certain way for them to understand her poem and her writing. This allows Woodson to emphasize certain words and phrases or ideas. She also uses storytelling elements such as dialogue. And the combination of poetry and storytelling helps Woodson immerse you as readers even more deeply into her childhood world. So let's meet the author. This is Jacqueline Woodson, and she was born in 1964 in Columbus, Ohio. She recalls being happiest as a child when she was writing. And she said, "I wrote on paper bags and on my shoes and on denim binders." A 2008 Newbery Honor winner, Woodson believes that writers need to be honest and to listen to the voices of young people. Now I would like you to turn to page 12 in your My Perspective book. This is our concept vocabulary page for this text. And in this text, you're going to encounter the following words. But before you read them, we want you to note how familiar you are with each word, and then we want you to rank the words in order from the most familiar to the least familiar. So you're going to rank the most familiar word with a number 1 and your least familiar word with a number 6. And you're going to put that ranking here in the second column. Your words are squish, humming, twist, twirl, shushes, and feathery. Now, when you're ranking them, the word over here that you are the most familiar with, you're going to write a 1 in that line. And then you're going to number the rest of the boxes 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So 6 would be the least familiar. So I would suggest doing your most familiar and putting a 1 in that box, then finding your least familiar word in this list and putting a 6 in this box, and then going through and looking which is the next most familiar word. You'll put a 2. Then your next familiar word after that is a 3. So you're working down to your least familiar, or yeah, maybe I've seen it, but I don't know what it means, kind. So again, you're going to be using the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. One number in each of these boxes. Then you're going to have a vocabulary worksheet. So let's take a closer look at this worksheet. So in this worksheet, you have those 6 words written here in the box at the top. Squish, humming, twist, twirl, shushes, and feathery. In part A, in each of the following items, think about the meaning of the italicized word and then write the answer for your question. So the statement is, Juan felt the squish of moss beneath his feet as he walked through the forest. Was the ground beneath Juan's feet hard and brittle? Explain. So I'm going to change my ink so that it stands out. And you would type yes or no. So does squish mean that the ground would be hard and brittle? So I would type no. Oh, my ink did not change color. I would type no because squish means it is soft, period. And then you're going to continue on this section in that manner. In part B, this is our onomatopoeia words, and you are going to highlight or underline the correct onomatopoeic word that completes each sentence. For example, in number 1, all the tools came crashing down or swooshing down when Pete tried to replace the wrench. And I would believe that crashing would be the sound that you would hear right when a bunch of tools came falling down. So I would underline or highlight that word, and you'll finish the other 3 in that manner. Now, the next sheet that you have is a memoir and poetry sheet. So you're going to read a poem by Robert Frost called After Apple Picking. And using the lines from this poem, you're going to answer these 3 questions in complete sentences. So the first question wants to know, what is the point of view in this poem and how can you tell? Point of view is where we talk about first person, second person, third person. And how do we know? What words does the author use to let you know that it's either first person, second person, or third person? Next, you're going to answer the question, what is the author describing in this excerpt or this part of the poem? And then finally, what feeling does the author express here? So what feeling are you getting, or is the author giving you when you're reading this poem? You want to make sure that you write these in complete sentences. When you are done, please make sure that you go back to your Google Classroom assignment and turn them in.